my name's Tom Grode. I'm a Skid Row artist, and we are here in Grand Park, downtown Los Angeles. And behind us is We Rise. So as an artist, I was one of the artists chosen by the county to create and curate a community creative expression. And so We Rise kind of came in and did a bunch of stuff in Grand Park, and that's what we're looking at. And before I explain it, I will read an official sentence. We Rise is an initiative of the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, encouraging well-being and healing through art, connection, community engagement, and creative expression. So what's behind us, visually and through audio, is sort of honoring all the celebrations that didn't happen over the course of the past year because of COVID restrictions. All the birthday parties and the wedding anniversaries, all the family and neighborhood and community celebrations that would have taken place throughout Los Angeles County that couldn't take place because people were not allowed to gather the way you want to gather. People are not allowed to touch each other the way you want to touch each other as families and friends. So here's an honor of all the celebrations that didn't happen, as well as opening the door to all the future celebrations. And this represents the diaspora of all the different peoples, all the different nations, all the different ethnic groups from around the world that have come to Los Angeles County and now call Los Angeles County their home. So we're just getting different types of music being streamed in every half hour with all kinds of cultures representing by this large representation, creative expression of celebration. So that's We Rise here, and it's parts of other Grand Park have other expressions of We Rise as an initiative celebrating hope, celebrating healing, whether that's healing from trauma, whether that's healing from childhood abuse, whether that's healing from systemic racism and oppression. We Rise is all about everyone rising in healing. May 1st to May 31st is We Rise, but May 1st to May 31st is also National Mental Health Awareness Month. So Jenna Kyle, who I'm not going to talk about right now, so she gets to be mysterious, but I will introduce her very soon. We met for the first time in person 2 nights ago. We have developed an intense relationship over the past 8 months on Zoom, and we'll talk about why. But I had the pleasure of meeting her officially 2 nights ago because of another part of We Rise, which is I'm part of the Los Angeles Poverty Department, the LAPD, the oldest arts organization in Skid Row, and we did a project called the New Compassionate Downtown. And we did it over the course of 18 months of workshops and Zoom rehearsals, and we thought we were going to do it this coming June, because according to the county, things hopefully kind of go back to the way they were a couple of years ago in June, and we're kind of making that transition. So we were going to do our show, our theater show in June, which kind of rhymes with Zoom, in a parking lot. But then we kind of went from off-Broadway to Broadway overnight because We Rise partnered with the Museum of Contemporary Art, MoCA, here in downtown LA, and they contacted us for our show to switch from June to May, which is the month of We Rise, to make it part of We Rise and Los Angeles Poverty Department in partnership with MoCA. So there's MoCA, the main MoCA, which is Grand Avenue here downtown, but then there's MoCA Geffen, which is in Little Tokyo. So we had the pleasure of a beautiful outside courtyard to do our performance that, MoCA brought in a Hollywood film crew to shoot it and put it over their MoCA YouTube channel. So we did that Friday night, Saturday night. Saturday night is last night, this is Sunday. So I got a chance to meet Jenna, who came to see the show. Okay, so who are you? Jenna is one of the leaders of the Poor People's Campaign of Los Angeles, which is part of the California Poor People's Campaign, which is part of Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And so she's part of the faith and legal group, which is local and statewide. She's one of the leaders. I'm the leader of the arts and culture group for Los Angeles. So what caused us to, connect in a really big way was something called Let Us Worship, which is led by Sean Foyt. It got a lot of publicity the end of last year because Let Us Worship had been traveling throughout the U.S. over the course of 2020 doing worship protests. What does that mean? Well, it means protesting COVID restrictions on churches being able to meet in person on a Sunday. They, for the most part, weren't allowed to meet. So Sean Foyt led this movement, Christian rock and roll, going across the country from city to city, protesting the fact that churches weren't meeting on Sunday. And their protests were gathering sometimes several thousand people, sometimes a smaller number, to not just gather together to praise and worship with Christian rock and roll, but not to wear masks, not to do social distancing. Needless to say, this was extremely controversial. Then when they came to LA towards the end of last year, they came to Azusa Street in Little Tokyo. Okay, Azusa Street revival of 1906. If you know the history of American Christianity, that is one of the most significant moments in time. The Azusa Street revival of 1906 birthed Pentecostal Christianity. So he not only brought his COVID protest to Los Angeles, he specifically came, to the mothership, Azusa Street. So when I found this out, I immediately went to the Poor People's Campaign, and one of the main people who jumped into the deep water on this thing was Jenna. So Jenna Kyle, faith and legal, which put you in a unique position to deal with Sean Foyt. So please share about that.
Sure. So from a faith perspective, we were deeply troubled with Sean Foyt's message, supposedly loving your neighbor, doing great things on Skid Row, but yet not wearing a mask. And at that time in Los Angeles, it was really, really bad. And we had no beds in ICUs. We had really bad pandemic conditions, and so it just really wasn't the time for this kind of worship protest. So from a faith perspective, we were deeply troubled. From a legal perspective, it was also troubling. They were trying to take advantage of a Supreme Court ruling that was allowing in-person worship at churches, which was very controversial and hadn't taken place, hadn't been adopted in California. And so we were trying as a legal group to send letters to our local politicians, letting them know that this was happening and that they needed to step up from a public health crisis perspective.
And so that got actually a lot of publicity in Los Angeles towards the end of last year, because they came, literally their big concert was a New Year's Eve celebration, a blowout, celebrating churches protesting. I guess that's what it was celebrating. So it was very intense, and Poor People's Campaign worked with Skid Row community leaders, got LA Times, CBS Local. Jenna was one of the main people being interviewed because she had this unique role of both faith and legal. And so that's how we got connected. So there's lots of Zooms, lots of discussions, lots of how to deal with this thing. We weren't able to completely shut it down, even though that was the goal, but we sure threw up obstacles and made their thing much more difficult. They're still traveling around the country doing revival gatherings, and they're in fact been going to several cities in California. They have not come to Los Angeles. So apparently we were a pain enough in their neck. They're like, I don't think we're going to Los Angeles. So in that sense, it was successful. But it was an amazing experience, a baptism by fire, and got us connected in a really deep way. So all of that to set up what's now going to happen. which is Azusa Healing is the name of my project with We Rise. Healing is one of the main Native American translations for Azusa, but we're now going to go explore another translation. So we are going to walk that way. So we were talking about the word Azusa, and a main translation is healing, but there's another translation as well, which is SweetWater. And so that's what we're going to look at right now, Azusa, SweetWater. And where we are right now is where the statue of Christopher Columbus used to be in Grand Park, a big marble pedestal, a huge statue, and it was removed a couple years ago as part of Indigenous Peoples Day. So Christopher Columbus Day became Indigenous Peoples Day, and the Indigenous peoples and their allies mobilized with City Hall and got the county to physically remove the statue of Christopher Columbus and to put it in storage. So this was the statue, it's now empty, and of course now we're looking at the entire history of colonization, and so clearly there's a need for healing. And so the next step is please share your Native American identity with us.
Sure. So it's funny that you mentioned the Indigenous Peoples Day. I was at Cornell Law School, and we actually heard about Indigenous Peoples Day. I was president of the Native American Law Students Association, and so it was so heartwarming to know about what was going on in Los Angeles, and that the day was actually being reclaimed essentially for Native populations. I'm Chickasaw, and we're a people that's from Mississippi and Alabama that was through the Trail of Tears brought to Oklahoma, where we currently now reside as a nation. And so for me, healing and the relationship to nature is very important as a Native woman. And so this is very important to me. The SweetWater Association Azusa is healing. And so now we're going to be pouring water in this space to promote healing and kind of reclaim this area that once was a site of a Christopher Columbus statue. And so now, in honor of SweetWater, in honor of Azusa healing, we're going to pour this water as a representation of rebirth and acknowledgement of sacred spaces.
Thank you, Jenna. You are an amazing young woman walking in the path of your ancestors. And so, that is part of Azusa Healing as a project of We Rise. We Rise is taking place throughout neighborhoods of Los Angeles County the rest of the month of May. Of course, it will live online for as long as there's an online. Thank you.